At the same time, color is also very, very functional. Interaction cues are called out by color. So if you take a look at this tweet from one of my favorite accounts, the UX drinking game. Good stuff. If you're not following this, you should. If nothing else, it'll give you a good smile every day. All right. So here's how color is used across Twitter. If we ghost this out, you can see that the color elements come forward and they all signify different things. They all communicate different visual cues that we have become accustomed to and therefore know how to use. At the top left, you've got this arrow, which is an interaction cue. That's how you go back to where you were. Right below that, we've got a hashtag, UX drinking game. That is also an interaction cue. It tells us this does something if you touch it. Down below, we've got a URL, interaction cue. What I want you to notice here is that they're all treated the same. Same color, same blue. If they chose different colors for the back symbol at the top, for the hashtag, and then another one for the URL, this experience wouldn't be as consistent, okay? And it wouldn't be as effortless when you use it. You would literally have to think about it every single time if these colors were all different. On the right, the symbol to create a new tweet, that's another interaction cue. Down below that, we've got a state change. Now, here's what I want you to notice. Instead of blue, we've got red. Why is that? Think about it for a sec. The reason is because it's a different type of interaction. In this case, the state change is an anomaly compared to everything else. Everything else is an interaction that takes you somewhere else. This just says, hey, something's changed. Therefore, we use a different color to signify it. And of course, down at the bottom of the navigation area, we have another interaction cue, which is the home symbol that takes us to somewhere else. Color creates connection. It creates continuity. I'm going to show you what I mean by connection and continuity. Hiko, which is this website, it's another design organization, uses color to reinforce the user journey. Okay, here's what I want you to look at. Take a look at the app UI on the left. Notice how the majority of that UI is this red color. They're showing you an example of an app that they built. Now, when I tap that to read the case study, I get this. So here's what they did. The landing page of that app case study uses the same color scheme that we saw in the app's UI design, right, from the preceding screen. So the red that they showed us, that was actually part of the UI they designed, is used in their landing page of the case study. That reinforces connection. This is the next step in the journey from where you started. That communication is really, really important. That idea of connection, that idea of continuity. That's what enables us, again, to effortlessly, intuitively move through something without having to think too hard about it. That's how color supports interaction and user experience. This says, hey, you're in the right place. You went exactly where you thought you would go. Color also implies meaning. Color is subjective, all right? Our perceptions and our biases affect what it says and what it does to us. We all have different reactions to colors based on our upbringing, our culture, our language, and the things we've been exposed to. Some colors have universal appeal. Others are specific to geography, culture, and experience. Here's an example of a to-do list. Now, this is very heavily based on color. They're using it to signify things. We've got categories on our to-do list that are in blue. The one that's currently selected is in red. We've got a green color for the item that's checked off on the left. And then you've got the list below it, which goes from red to yellow, signifying urgency. Okay, the thing at the top is of utmost importance. The thing towards the bottom is of least importance. Now, here, where I am in the United States, that makes perfect sense because that's a color scheme that exists in other places that we're familiar with. Even a stoplight, a traffic light in the street, okay, goes green, red, yellow. Green is all systems go, everything's good. Yellow is, hey, it's not urgent, but pay attention. And red is, stop what you're doing right now and pay attention to this. Okay, that is not necessarily the case in other parts of the world. So while this makes sense to me, it's entirely possible that it may not make sense to someone in another part of the world. So I point that out because it's something you have to be cognizant of when you choose colors, especially when you associate color with meaning in an interaction. Your color selection has to be appropriately useful and meaningful for your audience and for your users. So you got to do your homework here. You got to research, you got to test. Now, when you use color, it should highlight, okay? It should not determine, and here's what I mean by that. Color should never be the sole differentiator of things in the user interface. Take a look at Airbnb, and I'm going to show you an example of why. Now, if you look at the reddish, pinkish color, log in with email, notice that it's using that button, and look below in particular, okay, where you have links to terms of service, privacy policy, guest refund policy, et cetera, et cetera. Here's what that would look like to somebody who has some degree of color blindness. How hard is it to read that stuff at the bottom? Okay, it's gone. It almost doesn't exist. The login with email button degrades significantly. All that contrast dies, the separation from the background dies, and right now this is very hard to look at. So this is a case where color, for someone who has perfect color perception, it works, but contrast is lacking. And because contrast is lacking, if we go to the right again, somebody who is colorblind has a hell of a time looking at this and a hell of a time understanding what the hierarchy of information is. And it's just more cognitive effort because contrast is very poor, as you can see. So color is helpful, but it can't ever be the only way you separate information. So color should highlight and it should guide. For extended screen situations, when people are staring at a screen for a long time, you always want to use light, muted background colors. If I had a nickel for every time I saw oversaturated color in a user interface, particularly even in enterprise situations where people are spending a long time staring at the screen, I'd be a very rich man. This fatigues the eyes instantly. You have to remember that refracted light from a screen blasting into your eye fatigues your eye muscles. So be kind to your users. Stick with light, muted background colors. Bright saturated colors should only be used as visual accents. Okay, we looked at Twitter a second ago. Notice how everything is sort of very low contrast. It's black and white, and then we've got a blue that stands out. Very simple, very subtle. Here's another example. Okay, we've got a to-do list. Notice how the color that's used there is very, very subtle. But what I also want you to notice is that nothing here is dependent on color. If that blue wasn't there, you would probably still be able to use this, okay? Because of size, because of contrast, because of the visual manner in which controls are treated, okay? Contrast does most of the work here. And we're going to talk about contrast later, but I just want to point this out. Color, again, is used as an accent. And there is nothing about using this app that is dependent on your understanding or seeing these colors properly. So the rule they're following here is you start with one dominant neutral color, which is this black and gray, and then you add an accent color, which is blue.